Okay, everybody. So, if I can have your attention, I'd like to begin the proceedings for this afternoon, so at least we can start on time. My name's Nick Delamere. I'm the head of the Department of Physiology here. It's really an honor and a privilege to host this meeting, and it's a great pleasure to see everybody, some old friends, some friends that I've known for quite a long time, coming into town, new people that I've met last night, some of them I've met today. We're very, very grateful that you made the effort to come to Arizona on our hottest time of the year. But let's face it, if you're going to feel the desert heat, you might feel it. You might as well do it full tilt. And this is full tilt. This is about as good as it gets. So this is just a picture of my department. Some of our members are here, some are not. It's a big department. It's in the College of Medicine. We teach medical students, we teach graduate students, and we teach undergraduate students, which is what brings us here today. I have the honor of having been the leader of this department for, well, I'm not counting exactly, but by Friday it's 12 years on. And it's been a thrill, and in large part it's been a thrill because we were able to, it was my introduction to working with undergraduate students, and it was my introduction to working with really cool people like Claudia Stanescu, who I'm going to introduce now. Claudia is the director of the Physiology undergraduate program, and I'm going to hand it over to her because this is one of the cases where it's better to be led by somebody who knows what they're doing. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Nick, and welcome, everyone. I want to say a warm welcome, but I think I should say a hot welcome, right? So we're glad you're here, and we're excited about our program and about this meeting. If it lives up to last year's, at least, I'd be really glad, because I think we had a really good time last time, and we had great discussions. And we're glad to see some new faces. We're happy to see that we have some new participants and also some returning participants, which is wonderful. So. Just an outline of just the things that I'm going to go over just to kind of get us started, just an introduction here, a few event logistics, some meeting goals, a little history of PMIG, a little bit of data, and Erica's going to share more data a little later, and then we'll have a little bit of about our sponsors at the end. So I wanted to start with our meeting folders. I hope you opened them up and you saw what's in there. They're in your bag, so if you haven't grabbed that yet, I would say on one side you have this nice, beautiful flyer about surviving the heat. I'll let you read that. Just make sure you drink lots of water. We feel obligated to let you know to make sure you're going to do okay here in this climate, and that you don't leave stuff in your car because things will melt. Temperatures go over 150 in the car if you leave things there for an hour or so. We also have some maps in there. So there's a map of the important buildings and places that we're going to be spending time in. So you want to make sure you look at that. Campus and parking map. Those are just our building, where the poster session will be. So make sure you take a look at that. And also one with points of interest around campus. So if you didn't rent a car, I would highly recommend that you go see some of these places. There are 10 listed here, but I would say definitely stop by number 5, Arizona State Museum, and the Center for Creative Photography. And there are other places that would be wonderful too. But if you're gonna try not to walk around too much, these are closer anyway. You also have a list of all the attendees, their contact information, so that you can get in touch with each other and you don't have to necessarily exchange business cards unless you really want to. The program is also in there. So the program was designed by John Kennedy, and I definitely want to give him credit. He's back there in the corner also helping us with all the technology. He's our secret weapon, as I keep introducing him to people. He's wonderful. So he put this together, and I wanted you to take a look at the agenda, and I know he sent that to you, but I just want you to notice that we have a lot on our agenda. We have lots of things that we want to discuss, and we will need to stick to our timeline pretty closely. So just because we want to be respectful of everyone that is going to be presenting, and we don't want the person that's last to end up not having any time to talk. So I will be helping with that. So what I'm going to be doing, I'll be sitting right here in the front, and when we have 5 minutes, for those of you who are speakers, 5 minutes left, I'll just raise my hand and give you the 5-minute mark. And then 2 minutes, I'll stand up. So you're aware that you need to kind of wrap it up, okay? Just trying to keep it going and to be able to move forward. Also for the discussions, for those of you who are lead facilitators for discussions, same thing. We're trying to keep it on track. And I know it's difficult because we'll have good conversations and we won't want to stop, but we also have breaks and we'll have dinner and we'll have other times when we can continue our conversations with colleagues at that time. Okay, so that's for the folders. Let's see. The wireless access, I hope those of you who have computers figured out how to do that. There's some cards on the tables. You have to create an account. All right, so I'll leave it at that. If you need some help, you can always ask John. So hopefully that's not an issue for anybody. Accessibility, there is an elevator in the building if anyone needs it. If stairs are an issue, it's right across the way from this room. And the restrooms are right behind us. So if you exit through these doors, you'll see them right behind us here. Feel free to get up whenever you need to. We will have snacks in the afternoon, and we have some goodies on the table. Lunch will be till 1:30, so feel free to get extra, to get more if you want. If you want to get up, it's no problem. So the other thing about the meals too is tonight at 6 p.m. we have dinner at Gentle Ben's. So you have a drink ticket in your name tag, so make sure you check. There should be a blue drink ticket in there. If you don't have one, make sure you talk to Linda in the back there. So Linda's, maybe raise your hand so everyone knows who you are. Yes, thank you, Linda. All right, so we will be moving around this room. We're not going to stay in one spot, although we tend to want to kind of pick our seat and stay there. We're going to be moving, and we're going to do that for discussions. We're going to split up into groups based on discussion topics, so we'll guide you through that as we go through the program. So I'm just letting you know kind of what to expect with that. And then all of the slides and handouts are available at this shared drive that I emailed to all of you. Hopefully you got that. If you didn't, let me know, and I'll try and send it again a little bit later. If you're trying to take notes and follow with the slides, they'll be available. Now, we'll also have all of this available after the meeting, and we're recording all of this. So all of this is being recorded through Panapto, and you'll have audio recordings of all the sessions. And we'll try to do question answers with mics so we can capture some of that as well. And that will be available next week sometime. So we'll definitely put that up. It just won't be instant. Okay. All right, very good. So some of our meeting goals, we have very ambitious goals, I should say, and you can see that from our program. We want to start creating national guidelines for our physiology programs. We would like to share resources on programmatic learning outcomes and assessments. So that's one of our goals, hopefully, as we're having discussions. One of the places where resources are already available is our website. So hopefully you're now familiar with the website, physiologymajors.org, and you can always find resources there. If you think of other resources that would be useful for others, you can always let us know and we'll add it. Develop a PMIG mission statement and group organizational structure. We're new, and I think it's important for us to establish that and as we move forward. Also, we want to discuss the student perspective. We have a presentation tomorrow about that, and we'll be sharing some data from this year's survey. Jen is going to go over that tomorrow. And we'll discuss in the graduate career trajectory and employability skills. We have Julia and Michelle that will do that. And we'll talk about professional skills, again, how we use that, how we teach that in our curricula. And one of the major things, I think, for us, at least for me, in this meeting is to build this network of professionals to be able to turn to when we're sort of wondering, are we on the right track with certain things? It's just been so great to have that and to build that and continue to build it. Sharing resources and best practices for teaching physiology, discussing the role of our professional societies, HAPS, APS, and ACDP in our efforts. I think that will be one of our first sessions, so that will be an an important discussion as well. And then lastly, collect some data about published physiology core concepts in our curricula. So meeting goals are also included in the program, so you can take a look at that. A little bit of a history of PMIG, and I feel like Erica should be giving this history instead of me, but this started as a grassroots collaboration among friends, and some of you have seen some of this already from the previous meeting, but Erica was part of that, Erica Wehrwein, John Halliwell, Dan McCann, and Eric Henriksen were the founding members of this group, and this was formalized in 2014, and there were publications that were out there that are already available for you to look at if you like from the data that was collected at that time. They had a networking session. I was part of the 2018. I wasn't necessarily part of the early ones, but our founding members were part of that. And there were presentations and workshops at different meetings at the ITL, at the ACDP and HAPS, and also consultations with different programs, which were done primarily, I would say, by Erica, because she's been the sort of the driving force for PMIG. Our inaugural meeting was last year at MSU in May, and we have 45 participants from 34 institutions, and we published this. This has already been published, so you can take a look at some of the data from that meeting, which was very successful. Now, this doesn't show up very well. This is a map of the world, and you can see where our participants are coming from. So this year we have 46 participants from 32 institutions, pretty close to what we had last year. So in terms of numbers, and 34 institutions last time, 32 this time. We have the institutions that are participating from the US. You can see them here in this map, and the nice thing is you'll be able to look at this later if you'd like. And then we have US, Canada, and Dominica. And from international locations, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, India, and Australia. So we have some data about the colleges, the different department names, and also the different program names that we all belong to. And basically what I'm gathering from this is from the pre-surveys that we did, and the data collection was not everyone really completed that. So if you haven't, I would recommend that you do that. But based on what we heard from from those who completed it, we have quite a lot of different department names and a lot of different colleges that house our programs. So I'm actually going to skip that because Erica's standing up. And program titles, you see we have quite a variety. 67% of us have the word physiology in our program title, but some do not, but they still have an emphasis on physiology. Okay, so this, like I said, you can look at it later. The primary focus seems to be systems and integrative physiology and human physiology, but then there are some other areas as well, maybe slightly smaller percentage, again, from those who responded to the survey. Total enrollments, quite a variety, small and large programs, and graduates, somewhere up to about 400 graduates, depending on the size of the program, which makes sense. I'd like to thank our sponsors. ACDP and APS were very generous in providing support for our meeting, and also the different institutions that provided support. University of Minnesota, Michigan State University, University of Iowa, University of Oregon, and the University of Arizona, who made this possible registration free, which has been great for us educators. So we're very thankful for their support. I also want to thank our planning committee. This group is an amazing group of people that care about physiology education and the graduate education, and it's been wonderful to work with them this past year. And also, you get to meet them. They'll be introducing all of our speakers. So we're going to be taking turns in introducing speakers, so you get to see all of our committee members. And our local committee, who made this all possible, really, I couldn't have done any of this without them. They did most of the work. So Linda Bond, Carol Beltran, Marlise Borland, John Kennedy, and Cindy Rankin. So our group is just a wonderful group, and they've all worked very hard to make this possible. So if we can give them a hand of applause, I would really appreciate it. Okay, very good. So that's what I have for my introduction. What I'm going to do next is introduce our first speaker. And our first speaker is Erica Wehrwein. Dr. Erica Wehrwein is first because we want her to set the stage for our Sorry, let me just move this way. Set the stage for a discussion about curricular guidelines or creating national guidelines for physiology programs. Erica, well, I got to admit that when I first saw Erica's CV, I was overwhelmed. I wasn't even sure. I mean, she's done so much. She's accomplished a lot. And I'm just going to highlight a few of the things that she's currently doing and they relate to this conference. And she is currently an assistant professor in the Department of Physiology at Michigan State University. She earned her doctoral degree also at MSU in human and integrated physiology and did a postdoc in working on blood pressure regulation, just very broad sort of area, with Dr. Mike Joyner at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. She's currently the course director and instructor for for integrated physiology, the instructor for early clinical experience virtual imaging and physiology lab, the co-director for the Beckman Scholars Program, an undergraduate research program, the youth program director and outreach coordinator for the Department of Physiology at MSU, and she also serves as on the undergraduate programming and curriculum committee in her department, and is the faculty mentor for the Physiology Society undergraduate club. So you can see she wears a lot of hats. She's doing lots of different things. She cares a lot about physiology education. So for me, having worked with her for more than a year, I can see how passionate she is about physiology education and about really doing what's best for our students. And I think a lot of us agree that we care about that. But I can truly see in everything that she's done that you can see it in her works, not just in words, right? So I think that means a lot. She has published a number of articles related to physiology education, including Setting National Standards for Physiology Undergraduate Programs that was published in Advances in Physiology Education last year. And her talk today is related to that. So please welcome Dr. Erica Wehrwein.
Thank you. So Mike's on, I think, John. Thank you. Thank you, Claudia, for the welcome, and thank you, Arizona, for hosting us. Welcome to the second meeting of the Physiology Majors Interest Group, and I want to talk to you a little bit more about the organization and about creating some guidelines. And we had so much international interest that I changed all of the talk of national guidelines to international guidelines because there's a lot of commonalities and a lot of common interests. So what I would like to say really is this gathering, as I said last year, is really a dream come true to think that very innocently we sort of were talking amongst friends about, I think we could get together and share notes and we could really help each other out, and could you review my program and let's have a chat, to have that be an international meeting with all of you fine folks here. It actually just gave me a chill. It makes me very, very happy to be amongst people that are willing to spend a day and a half talking about bettering the education for our students in physiology worldwide. This is our website that Claudia mentioned, and I want to thank Valerie for helping build this. We are not web designers by any means, but we learned and we tried to figure it out. So this is our growing website, and under the resources tab, you can find a lot of the articles that Claudia mentioned that have been published, as well as some great assessment tools and a lot of different things. So I would encourage you to take a look at the resources, and there's a meetings tab up here as well. We'll have information from this meeting posted there, and all the files from last year are posted. So right now we are very grassroots, very welcoming, and we are sharing everything freely, right? So we're sharing all the slides with each other, we're sharing the audio with each other, and we're gonna try to just build community that way. So right now we don't have to charge for any of those things, and this is one of the places where we're just trying to gather information. So one of the best parts about forming this group was that we're realizing bits and pieces of, hey, this person was using this great assessment tool, and that person has this great set of ideas, and this is going to be the place online where you can find all of those materials. And we already have commitments for the next 2 years to run this meeting again at the University of Minnesota and the University of Oregon. So we are planning again gatherings in this spring in the next couple of years as well. Right. So some of the key papers that are on the resources tab that I wanted to focus on here, and I don't know, the laser doesn't really point up there. Yeah. Okay. So the one I want to point out, these resources are some that we've published on behalf of the community and the data that we've collected from you guys. I want to focus on the first one, which was my sort of straw man that I put up about what are some good ideas for setting national guidelines. And we've come to this over doing surveys of our membership over the last couple of years, that there really seems to be an appetite to have at least a basic set of scaffolding that we can all hang our hats on as we're moving forward. So I want to come back and refer to that paper, but if you want to read it in its entirety, that's the full reference. And of course, we have the meeting reports from previous meetings and some of the work we did just identifying curricular standards from across the country here. We have two posters. If you're interested, we did, as we did this year, a pre-meeting survey where we ask you guys to fill us in about some features about your programs. We did the same thing last year. We did a pre-meeting survey and a post-meeting survey. We want to share that data. We're trying to get it actually published, but we have two posters at the poster session tomorrow if you want to just come and see the demographics and some of the data we collected among programs. We are a unique entity here. So Physiology Majors Interest Group, this gathering of people doesn't happen at any other meeting. So we've been traveling around the last few years, like let me pop into an APS meeting, let me pop into a HAPS meeting, let me go over to ACDP, and at no place are all of us living together, right? So that's why this gathering is so important, is there isn't another place for us to be, but there's a lot of people who are having common interests. And some of the stakeholders, American Physiological Society, we'll hear from in a second. We have two representatives from there. Their education committee, careers committee, teaching section, they've all been doing quite a bit of work on this. And in fact, in 2010, they were the main keepers of the list of where all the physiology programs are in the world. And right now, they've asked us to start gathering that data and keep that website up to date, because we're finding nooks and crannies where programs were hidden that we didn't know about before. HAPS has been involved in betterment of undergraduate education for a long time, and Dee Silverthorne's here representing HAPS. She'll speak to you later too. They have written detailed course objectives, learning outcomes, and a validated exam that's available for A&P courses, and she's going to talk about how that's developing into physiology-only learning objectives that we can use heavily for our programmatic decisions. Also, the Association of Chairs of Departments of Physiology, Nick was just mentioning that, the chairs really care about undergraduate education, and they've dedicated 2 of their last meetings to undergraduate issues for curriculum, core concepts, and professional skills development. So even though not all of the department chairs of physiology have undergraduate programs, they're all heavily invested in the work that we're doing, and all of these groups have provided sponsorship to our organization. We'll talk more about this, but there is an assessment tool that's available freely online called the PhysMaps project that was meant to be an end competency exam for majors. So provided that we can all use a common set of objectives, it was built around vision and change and about the core concepts. So that's great. The journal Physiology has started something called the Students' Corner, where undergraduate students provide their insight on undergraduate education. In a little bit, I'm going to ask Mary Pat to tell us about a project about learning progressions in physiology and undergraduate education. We have boatloads of departments, chairs, and faculty that are interested, and so many more things I can't even begin to tell you. Jenny's going to mention something about the Pulse community in her presentation later. They've developed a lot of great departmental rubrics for assessing your program, and she's going to talk a little bit more about that. And I did want to point out that the International Union of Physiological Sciences saw how many international attendees that we had, and they're working to partner with us next year to provide some travel funding for our international people. So a lot of people very supportive, a lot of potential partnerships, and I really think that that's great. I will mention a couple of times. One area that we haven't directly partnered with, but I think is a natural partnership, is the Association for Advisors. So we're all here and we all really care about what's going on with our students, but there's entire other conferences about excellence in advising that we could really learn a lot from. So it's possible that in our future meetings we might invite some of these folks to come by. It's possible that some of you might even want to attend. These organizations both have national meetings. And some of us, I know, do advising sort of informally in our departments, and I feel ill-prepared to do that sometimes, since I'm not a formally trained advisor. But I think that this partnership also could help, especially the advisors for health professionals, because as it turns out, the majority of the students in all of our programs are aspiring healthcare professionals. Right. So in terms of creating guidelines for programs, there's a few things that I want to think about, and this is the roadmap for the talk that I'm going to go through, and we'll hit on each one of these as I go through. So why would it benefit us to have guidelines? And again, students are where it's at for me, so we really want all of our students collectively to have the best education and career training possible. That's why we're here. That's why we all flew to Tucson, is so we can talk to each other about that. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of students in our program. So in terms of what it means to be a physiologist and training the future of physiology and the perception of that, we can actually set the course for that somewhat by what we're teaching in our programs and how we are perceiving and selling physiology. It helps us to have best practices that are common amongst our programs, building a community of excellence. And importantly, this came up more from the chair's meeting that I hadn't really thought about before, and that is influence on administration and allocation of resources and even working with publishers. So if we have our own set of guidelines that say, for example, it's a best practice that the physiology undergraduate program should have a laboratory experience, right? And there are some programs that are so big or are so under-resourced that they're not able to do that. But if you were able to go to your dean and say, the national guidelines for physiology say, we need to do a lab course, we have to find a way to make that happen. And so it also could provide some leverage in that regard. And if we find that the textbook offerings are not aligned with what we are, and we have national guidelines and choose a set of core concepts and learning objectives, it would really help maybe with textbook alignment and things like that too. So hopefully these things would be really powerful for all of us. And also then just even in our own individual courses, how do we know what to teach in my course, right? I think about, well, what am I going to talk about? What things do I know? What was my training? But it's always good to remember that course is nested in missions of your department. So some departments do or don't have set learning objectives for the major or set goals for the department. But also we have university, like my university has a set of guidelines that all majors are supposed to cover. And things that I'm doing in my course are supposed to be aligned with all of these things. But also because physiology is a discipline, right? I think this is the part that's missing for us, right? And that's why there's such a energy to get together and talk, is like we haven't really had this discussion before about what it means, what are the minimal guidelines that we need to have, like what would make a really excellent program and that we can all collectively buy into. So there are several approaches that other organizations have taken. The most intense of those would be a full-blown accreditation process where there's very strict guidelines, external reviews, and we're really held firmly to a set of standards. There are others that use sort of more of a more informal approval or certification process. And this was actually something that APS had talked about many years ago, as whether or not they might want to be part of some type of review process like that. And that could be through either self-evaluation or external reviewing. Where I think, based on the discussions from the meeting and the surveys that we did from PMIG last year, it seemed like we were kind of settling into more of a recommended programmatic guideline because there's quite a bit of diversity in our program. So that would be looking at what would be our most important core concepts, competencies, or did we want to have both of those in the guidelines? And I think I'll make a pitch, as I did in my editorial, that we probably want to have a little bit of both in there. And then the next level down would just be simply to use the existing resources. Jenny will talk about some published core concepts work. If we just say we agree to use the published core concepts in our teaching and go from there, like we could just provide the recommended readings and books and things like that for which to build programs on. And that would be fine too. I think the discussion is valuable. So to look at who's kind of doing what things as we collectively think about how we might want to come to consensus about this for the betterment of all of us. So things like clinical laboratory science and even biochemistry, they run formal accreditation processes, and the resources there are immense. We could dig in and look into those. I think that would be, my personal opinion is that's a little bit of a bold move for our first step. I think we might start with some more informal guidelines, but we can definitely talk about that. The Chemical Society and the NABT are both going after the model for approval and certification. The recommended curricular guidelines, microbiology, kinesiology, math, and physics are all doing that. And I want to particularly talk about the Kinesiology Association in the next slide, because they are a very similar group that as we are of about the similar size. And I want to talk to you a little bit about their process. And for those of you who were here last year, the president of AKA came and talked a little bit about their work. And then finally, we have existing already some course level learning objectives from HATS, but the plant biology undergraduate majors, that's the model that they are using. So we have a lot of different approaches that we could take in terms of setting our guidelines. What AKA did is they have a website that's structured similarly to ours. This website keeps a list of programs and contacts, which is what we're working towards. They have some core ideas and core concepts. They provide a lot of working documents for what a model curriculum would look like, how many credits of this and how many credits of that make a good program. They provide a list of learning outcomes for the major, and importantly, they have some rubrics for departmental self-assessment, and that was done by a subcommittee of AKA, and all these things are freely available online to model the program after. So that might be a good place for us to take a look at some of their resources. Now, in order for us to decide which direction we want to go and how to structure our guidelines, it's important to know at least a little bit about the nature of undergraduate programs around. So we are growing in the US. There were not very many. There are a couple of programs that have been around for a long time. Michigan State's been around since 1968. But there are growing numbers over the course of the last several years. And one of the key tipping points was when kinesiology programs started changing their name to physiology to meet the physical therapy school guidelines that were looking at program names, right? So we have a lot of new programs coming online every year, and those programs are growing. So the founding members of PMIG, when we got together in our informal group, we said, hey, like, how do our trends look? And they all look like this, right? And these are getting numbers of 1,500, 1,800, 2,000 students. And so we all are growing. And so I was interested in what was happening. We asked this group to fill out a pre-survey about how does your total enrollment look, and are you growing or not? And Claudia was showing this already. We're pretty split in terms of small to large programs. We have only a couple that are really big super programs, over 1,500. But the important part to me about this was we asked the question is, over the last 5 to 10 years, what is the enrollment in your major doing? And nobody said it's decreasing. People either said it's staying the same, slightly increasing, or largely increasing. So 40% of us that responded said our program is exploding, right? So we have many more new programs coming online, kines programs switching to physiology, and most of us are saying our enrollments are staying the same or growing. So we have a responsibility to all of those students to really do right by them. Like, they're coming to us for a reason, and we need to know who they are, what they need, and we need to deliver that to them. So that's part of the background. One of our first publications was just trying to identify where all the physiology programs were in the States, and our first pass was just looking for programs that had physiology somewhere in the title, and we found 45. But as Claudia mentioned, there are many other programs with many other focuses that all are still part of our group. So we definitely have way more than that. But the focus of the major is largely human physiology, systems integrated physiology. We have a good proportion of animal and cellular and also ex-phys, but largely systems physiology, and that's aligned with our student interest, no surprise. So our students, this is your own data that, for those of you who filled out the pre-survey, and the big pieces here are MD/DO, physical therapy, nursing, dentistry, PA, OT, right? Overall, 90% of our students are in some sort of pre-health track, right? And that is true. When the founding members did this, we all had 86 to 92% targeting that way. When I asked this data on the 2017 survey of this group, same thing. That is our audience. And even the people who selected other careers, if you see that respiratory therapy, dental hygiene, vet med, it's still also, so you could even take the other and add that into the pie too. But that's our audience, and it makes sense that they're coming to programs that are human physiology focused or systems physiology focused to get great training. So we have growing numbers of programs, overwhelmingly aspiring pre-health professionals. But I'll talk more tomorrow about how many of them actually end with a terminal bachelor's degree, which means we are aspiring to get as many of them into the career of their choice, but many of them are going to stop by choice, by many reasons why people end up stopping. So we have to not only prepare them well for the next step, but prepare them well to get a job. And that's really important to me. So right now we don't have any national standards, and I want to know who's responsible, and it's us. The people who came here are the ones who are going to answer these questions and figure that out. So we have some resources that I want to talk about in terms of how and what are we teaching them. There's a lot of great resources about what we can teach in our programs and in our courses. So Jenny is going to be one of our next speakers coming up about the core concepts of physiology and how those came to be. We also have HAPS objectives that will help guide us, and Dee is going to talk to you more about that. And HAPS also has some validated exams that are used in courses. We have an end competency exam called PhysMaps exam, which will come up several times. And so we have a lot of great resources already out there. The problem is not all of us know where those things live. And so part of my job, I think, is to get as much information from you guys, put it together on that website, put it together in publications so we can all share in what we know. Again, I'll ask Mary Pat to talk about her learning progression assessment a little bit later on. But these are things still about student learning, what's happening in a particular course. But I would ask you to think about, if we have some national guidelines, what about standardization of program requirements, right? Do we think that our students deserve to have a lab class in the discipline? Do we think that it's important to have a formalized career development program as part of the major, whether that's in a course, whether that's embedded over several courses? Is that something that's absolutely required in our programs? Do we think that it's important to have a discipline-specific writing course? Those types of things. So we could put that kind of stuff in the guidelines, as well as just the basic meat and potatoes core concepts work. So this kind of stuff I want to point out to you, and I'm going to walk through this. This stuff is all over. The point of this is, if you just focus on the first column, course, all the way down, and we're saying, do your students take an anatomy course? Do they take a physio course? How many? Do they use combined A and P? And what I really wanted to focus on first in that first column is just, it's kind of all over the place, right? We can't just say to our group, it's a standard that you need a 2-semester physiology core sequence. That's what makes a physiology major. Well, that's not what our departments are doing, right, already. So I think that there has to be a little bit of flexibility available there. And also, how many people have labs? So, 50% are saying we have an anatomy lab tied to an anatomy course. It kind of is all over the place. And so that's something to be aware of. I don't want to be too prescriptive if we write guidelines, so that there is a little bit of flexibility based on what people are already doing. But when we look at the required laboratory courses, when we just asked last year, this is the 2017 data, whether you're doing standalone physiology courses or combined A and P, do you have laboratory courses associated with that in your major? And if so, how many times do they see it? So 1 semester, 2 semesters, a majority of us are doing that. Some have many more, but there's a subset that have no laboratories in A&P or physiology required to graduate. And that is simply structural in some places. Is that an issue of funding? How does that work? Do you have too many students? Do you not have enough budget? But that would be something that we could leverage for having guidelines, if we want to suggest that that's something that's important to us. The key skills that our students need, we're going to talk extensively about that tomorrow, and Julia Choate is here to speak on this for us tomorrow. And this is something that I've been super passionate about lately, thinking about this. So employability skills is this whole side world in the literature that a lot of us haven't been exposed to yet. And there are so many organizations are putting out documents that say, hey, guess what? We need to start teaching about professional skills development, employability skills development. And what that means are things like good communication skills, good written and oral communication skills, empathy, teamwork, learning to work in diverse environments, those kind of just general cross-cutting competencies that are good. So the AAMC, the Association of Colleges and Universities, the President's Advisors on STEM, I could give an hour talk on all of these guiding documents that are coming out, and most people haven't even seen them, right? Especially this thing called STEM Connects STEM 2.0. It says everybody who's teaching STEM at the undergraduate level needs to include employability skills training as the #1 thing. The 4th thing on the list is disciplinary core concept knowledge, right? So we're saying, we did employer surveys, they're all saying, like, we don't care if they know memorize the Krebs cycle, that's great, but we really need someone who can work with us in the workplace. So this kind of stuff is really important. And just to note, the APS and ACDP this is back in 2003, I think, actually put out a guiding document for professional skills development that kind of was gathering dust. So a couple years ago, we started revisiting that and making some revisions to that, and hopefully we'll get a new version of that out soon. So these are those concepts that we're going to talk again about tomorrow. And just a couple quick snapshots here then. How many of us have a career exploration course in the major? Not very many. How many of us have a writing course required in the major? A few more, but there's still not a lot that have a disciplinary specific writing course. Those things would be really aligned with some of the stuff that I talked about. So it's good to see that snapshot. So again, we don't have guidelines, and up until this group existed, there wasn't a lot of communication among programs, and there certainly is a lot of variety of what we see in the programs, but there's also some common ground too. So I just want to mention one more time this in terms of assessment. The BioMaps project is an NSF-funded collaborative project, and the University of Colorado picked up the physiology piece. So there now is an exam that is a goal. It has to be given as a programmatic assessment in the major, beginning, middle, and end, and see how your students are doing on core concepts and vision and change. It's they did some good work, and Jenny will probably talk about this a little bit more too, but looking at vision and change, looking at published core concepts, looking at misconceptions, and students would take this in an exam that would take them online as much as an hour to take. And so we've been using this in our program to kind of track data over time. You can also compare against other programs if that's something that you're interested in. And I do want to give, Mary Pat has a poster on this Leap Up program that I've mentioned a couple of times. Her poster is tomorrow. But if you don't want to just give like the 2-second pitch about what that is and have them come to your poster tomorrow, that would be great.
Right now?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, just kind of just a quick thing.
So this is
Sure.
a project I'm working with my colleague, Dr. Jennifer Doherty at the University of Washington. And recently won a nice $1 million NSF grant to do this sort of work. And it's basically learning progressions in undergraduate physiology, with the idea being we need to help our students use principle-based reasoning in physiology, right? Not just memorizing, but principle-based reasoning. And she's had a lot of training in this from her postdoc work at MSU, where she worked with Andy Anderson on how you develop learning progressions. So that's what we're doing in physiology. And we're actually using, we'll drop a lot of names here, Harold Modell's work on core concepts as well as these general models, which is flux, mass balance, elastic structures. And so what we're doing is we're creating questions that students can take online. And with the thing that's a little bit different here is we're also working with an MSU group so that we can do computer lexical analysis of students' written out answers, right? So it is not a multiple choice, and this has just begun. We're not even finished. We're just now finishing the first year. So they have the question, the student would sit there, type in an answer. It ultimately, this is the goal, all right, it's sent to, you would insert it into a portal at Michigan State University, and then it comes back and it says what level the majority of your students are. A level 1, which is basically what we call anthropomorphic reasoning. Things happen in your body because it needs it or it wants it, right? All those words that drive us crazy. Whereas your top level student, your level 5 student, is actually using principle-based reasoning, and oftentimes, like particularly when we're talking electrophys, when we're talking about how concentration gradients and electrical gradients have to be balanced, and we have to talk about net forces. All right, so those are all the goals. I do have a poster tomorrow that I can talk in much more detail about, because we're also looking for places where we can try out these questions and get more answers from more students across the nation. Thank you, Erica.
And then Jenny's going to talk a bit more about this because she's involved in the Pulse Network. This is one of our resource tabs on our website that you can go in. They've actually developed a lot of great rubrics for departments to assess alignment with vision and change, student-centered learning, evidence-based teaching. These are great resources. We'll learn a little bit more about them, but I do also refer you to this if you have not seen it yet. So most of the rest of this meeting, we're going to be filling you in on more information to help inform the guidelines. And this is the main ideas from my editorial for writing guidelines. And then we have speakers that are related to each of these topics. So by the end of the day, tomorrow, we should have some pretty meaningful discussions on all of these areas and have a really good, solid foundation for moving forward with guidelines. And so we'll start with Jenny, and then tomorrow, Jen, Julia, Michelle, and I will all talk relating to the student perspective and professional skills development, and then we'll get into more about these assessment tools that are available. All right, so with that, I really, again, deeply, deeply thank you for your dedication to students, for making time to be here to support this community, and really we're helping physiology education worldwide by being here, and I think it's a really wonderful, wonderful thing to be a part of. So thank you so much for that. Before I turn it over to the next part, we're going to do some introductions among the group. I did want to pause for a moment here and just see if anyone had particular questions or comments relating to the things that I just said. And after we complete that, we'll break into some introductions amongst the group. Any thoughts come to mind, questions come to mind? Lisa.
One of the things we're grappling with at Minnesota is what it means to have a lab experience. And, does that mean doing computer simulations? Does that mean seeing a demo of live tissue? Does that mean all the students get a piece of live tissue they do experiments on? And, money really influences the kinds of things you can kind of do. And, the administration is like, well, just do demos because we don't have the money for all this stuff. And that's something we need to talk about, like what is lab.
Right. Right. So we're kind of watching for topics like that. So when we do some of the other breakout sessions tomorrow, like who wants to really talk about labs? Like I know I'm a lab person. That's like my primary thing. I know Nancy does a lot of lab work too. So there's several other of us how we're structuring that and how we're modeling that. It's a really good point. Thank you. So that could be one of our discussion topics. Okay. Other thoughts for right now? Yeah.
One of the thoughts that I had, Erica, and you hear me say this all the time. Those of you that are here as part of departments that are physiology majors, all right, and I know some of the kinesiology departments are morphing in one direction or the other. I think we also, one of the other pieces that I'd like to have this group think about where we go, and I don't have an answer one way or the other, is where does the line draw between being a physiology major and a department of physiology, and where has it become, kinesiology with a physiology focus, and where is it a neuroscience program with a physiology focus? I will still contend that neuroscience really is physiology. We've just added another thing on it. Sorry for all you people that are all part of the neuroscience group, Society for Neuroscience of 42,000 strong. I don't know how many there are now. So, and all the way down to places like where I am, which is the Department of Biology, where, we have lots and lots of students who take physiology-based courses that have some may even go to a physiology focus. So where are we going to go in terms of the spectrum of the types of programs that we have?
Yeah, so what's interesting about that is when we first, when Val and James and I first did the where are all the physiology programs in the country and who are they, and we did our own curricular assessments from their website and course catalog. It's interesting, the majority of people that attend this meeting are not from departments of physiology, right? They're from biology with an emphasis in physiology. Those are the people that were coming here. So it was interesting to see from that list, not all those people were even coming, So to say, like, who is our audience, for making that strict definition. And I think what I would also say too is, like, we're really serving the same students in a lot of these programs, same types of students. So we have the same kinds of issues and the same types of curricular needs in many cases. So that line for us is probably going to be pretty flexible, I would guess. Yeah.
But your comment, Erica, just also makes me think too that as we look at emerging topics, that making sure that, like, we're working or thinking about how the major and discipline is presented to others and to students. So, I'm at a pretty small institution. I have a pretty good relationship with, for example, our admission and enrollment management folks. But I think that as we talk about how students are finding their way to our program or what the messaging is regarding, I want to go to med school or I want to be a PT, that could be an emerging topic for us to talk about, is what is the role of faculty or departments in helping to clarify that message from either recruitment or just making sure that students know what they're getting into, as far as that. So in terms of the other stakeholders, I think the kind of admissions part of it from an undergraduate perspective is important to think about.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm very excited to talk more about the issue of employability skills. Historically, and even as we've gotten very close history recent, there's so many things content-wise we have to cover. And historically, there are many faculty who say, that's why I'm here, just to deliver content. And the idea that we talk about employability is really not my job. So I'm excited to hear, especially tomorrow, how do we bridge that gap so that faculty feel engaged in both pieces of that? Or do we divide it totally and have some faculty do that and some faculty do just content? To me, that's not the right approach, but I'm excited to see how do we do that? How do we make that be a feasible topic for everybody?
Yeah, I think Julie and I have both been thinking a lot about these things, and they have, Monash University has the model program. I always pump it up. I always keep Julia's work out there about how to do this both. And I would say the one punchline that I found really useful is a lot of the things that are employability skills are also things that help students learn in the classroom, right? So sort of a good active learning classroom develops teamwork skills in a pretty meaningful way. And so if you just kind of spin it a little bit differently and gives, right, you're already doing some of the things that are professional skills development. You just have to tell the students that you're doing that and why, right? But we'll talk a lot more about that tomorrow. And your point is valid, and everyone's going to run into that in their institution. Yeah, whose job is it?
Along those same lines, I think it goes along with the employability is that advising aspect, because I don't think we talked about that at last year's meeting.
We didn't.
But we talked about it at the EB group a little bit. And I know Anne makes fun of me because I griped that I have to advise 35 students.
Yeah.
I was prepared to teach, but I wasn't prepared to give career advice and advise the students. But I think that could be really closely tied to the employability aspect and wearing the different hats.
Right. I agree. Yeah. Great.